Hello, happy Friday. Welcome to this week's edition of Shaynel's 3 Cents. I'm your host, Shaynel Caldwell, the founder and executive director of Our Blended Families. And again, I'd like to welcome you to this week's edition of Shaynel's 3 Cents here on VoxWave.com. Before I get started today, to introduce my awesome, handsome guest that's here today, want to go into my little intro. And again, I'm going to ask you to bear with us a little bit. You all know I like to go into the political realm to see what's going on, not only in our local, state, and county news, but also what's going on in our federal news as well. But we're not going to do that today. Today I'm actually going to share, those of you that follow me on Facebook, those of you that follow us on obf.org, know that I tend to be very transparent. It is a blessing and a curse, and those of you that follow, again, you certainly understand. But for those of you that aren't aware, and as an introduction to this opening, today marks the beginning of a new chapter in my life. Today I started therapy today. This is kind of new for me because it's been a while since I've been in therapy, but I always say that it is something that we need to have done. If you need support, whatever type of support, you all know that we try to provide information and resources on the website. You know, we also try to provide connections to folks that can help you, whether or not it's in the areas of improving your education, learning a trade, whether or not you need help with regard to family court and child advocacy, whether or not you need parenting assistance. Whatever it may be, we want to make sure that people know that they can go somewhere to find those resources. And for me, it was a matter of realizing that I had reached a point in my life where Shaynel just couldn't do it anymore. When you rely on your faith, that should be first and foremost, most important for those of you that have ties to your faith, whether or not you're connected to your spirituality and making peace with yourself and making peace with the universe, and or whether or not you're able to go and speak to someone in what we call the secular world. If you need to seek out a therapist, a psychologist, for those that also need to connect with a psychiatrist, I certainly encourage you to do so. Taking care of yourself is always first and foremost. As a parent, you cannot take care of your kids if you don't take care of yourself. If you are a brother, a sister, even a boss, a coworker, there's nothing that you can do for anyone else unless you've taken care of yourself first. So I implore you, those that are listening, even our Facebook audience, those that are watching live on www.voxwave.com, please make sure you do whatever it takes to sometimes step out of yourself and say, you know, hey, this doesn't feel right. You know, maybe I'm overwhelmed a little bit. Maybe I'm having some feelings of anxiety. Whatever it is to where you're not comfortable in your spirit, you feel like you're losing a grasp with reality, make sure you reach out and talk to someone. I pray that it's a neighbor, a friend, a minister, whatever resources you have available to you, make sure that you reach out and connect with them. And so what I'm planning to do is I'm planning to take this journey with my therapist. I'm also going to be taking this journey with the friends that are connected to me at Awesome T-Sacks, yay, and of course my family, but making sure that I can be the best Shaynel that I can be and make sure that I'm able to provide good, important information and content for those of you that follow me as well. So again, I'm going to pray, and I hope that we don't end up in crazy town because we done been there, done that before. And if I do, I'll let you know how things are going. We'll send you postcards from the edge, also one of my favorite movies from back in the day. But again, I want to say thank you so much for taking this ride with us, and we'll keep you posted as things go. But ultimately, the goal is to be the best me that I can be so that I can help you guys be the best you. So with that, we're going to take a break and come back with our first guest, actually our first and only guest, Mr. Kevin Alston II, as they also call him, Professor Kev. So he's going to be here with us, the awesome Bowie State professor, and he'll be on shortly. We'll see you right back after this break. All right. Thanks for waiting on this awesome break with us. We are back on this week's edition of Shaynel's 3 Cents with my host, the awesome Professor Kevin Austin II.
Hey, how y'all doing?
And our studio audience. Yay! So if you would oblige our viewers, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I am a college professor. I teach communications at a couple different colleges, and I also am a life, business, and relational strategist.
Awesome, awesome. Can you share with us a little bit about the current college that you're teaching at? You want to give a shout out to any one of those possible viewers?
Well, okay, so I teach at Bowie State, which is my alma mater, so HBCU's in the house.
Go Bulldogs!
I also teach for College of Southern Maryland and also for Howard Community College.
Awesome, awesome. So education is certainly important. We certainly appreciate that. So one of the things that we're excited to talk about today is communication, because I'm a big advocate of effective, healthy communication, and that was one of the things that enticed me to bring you on the show, because I follow you a little bit in your awesome little podcast. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But can you tell us a little bit about what is effective communication? Because we hear communication all the time, but what does it mean to have effective communication?
Exactly. So we understand communication, but effective communication is about essentially, in a very small, I guess in a nutshell, it's about being able to communicate directly, I would say assertively, getting your point across without too much filler. So effective communication is not only the person who is sending the message, but also the people who are the recipients of the message. So this also talks about being actively listening, being actively present in a conversation, in a moment. So that's one of the things that I talk to my students about, and when I talk to other people, you know, doing my consultations and things, to talk about the duality of the communication dynamic, being there as the sender and the receiver of a message.
Okay, I'm having a musical genius moment where I will play the message and you play the sender. Is that one? You on point 5? I'm going. Have a minute.
All the
time. I know one of the things that I struggle with in communication, again, going back to what effective communication means, is that people like myself that have these A-type personalities, while others are talking, we are listening and waiting to respond. So I'm really halfway listening to what you're saying, because I'm just ready to go for the next interjection where I can make my point. So I'm sure that's not effective communication. So how does someone like myself try to overcome that? Because I'm just waiting for, again, my next episode to jump in.
Practicing mindfulness, just understanding that everybody has a part in the conversation, the communication dynamic. You want to hear other people's thoughts all the way out. Mm-hmm. It takes a lot, you know, it does take a lot of work, because we as humans, we obviously want to get our points across. But when you start to practice mindfulness, and you know, it's not you don't just wake up one day and it's already there, but it takes a sense of understanding yourself, looking at, okay, so now I saw where I interjected on somebody, or I cut somebody off. Let me be more mindful of that. Mm-hmm. And so when you start to practice those things internally, then what you end up doing is being more mindful in conversations, and you can hear people out.
Okay. I do recall a course that I took a few years ago that helped me to not be so interjection-y. And typically what I do is I try to, as I'm listening to you, I actually try to repeat it in my mind so that I'm hearing what you're saying. Because I also understand that part of effective communication is making sure that the other person heard you so that you can get to the next part. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So that's the active listening part. Mm-hmm. We do these things to make sure that we are staying on point. Obviously, in transactional communication model, there's a sender and receiver, but there's also a encoder and decoder. So to make sure that you understand what I was saying, we're looking for that feedback. Some verbal feedback, visual feedback, something that says you understand what I'm saying. It's one thing to just talk to somebody, but if they don't understand it, then the message gets lost. Mm-hmm. Does it make sense?
Mm-mm.
It doesn't make sense.
I'm kidding. That also brings me to another pet peeve of mine when I hear a lot of our young bros say, yeah, you feel me? You feel me? You understand? I'm like, I ain't heard nothing you said except you feel me and you understand.
I mean, that's just how people talk. So I don't get on that too much.
I do think that it's good to know that when we communicate, typically most people, we communicate for a purpose, correct?
It's always going to be a purpose in communicating, whether that purpose is valid or not.
Okay. So because we also do all things in the realm of relationships, we're going to circle into, look, our first topic, how to be a better communicator within your personal relationships. And having a conversation, for instance, with my son, I'm trying to tell him, oh, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. What are some tips that you can also offer for parents when we're talking to our kids? Because I think, particularly for me, because I have an adult son, I have to be mindful that he's no longer a child. He's still my son, but he's no longer a child, so I cannot talk to him and communicate with him that way to where he's able to receive the healthy tips or information that I'm trying to give him.
Okay, so you bring up an excellent point because you said he's adult. So how old, generally speaking, is he in the 20s, 30s?
He's 25.
Okay, so he is essentially, to everybody else besides you, he is an adult, like full adult. So understand, I think you already have taken strides by saying that you realize that he is an adult. Out in the world, he is treated as an adult. Only to you is he's treated as a son, you see? So everywhere else, he is looked at or seen to be an adult, making his own conscious decisions. And so he is understanding that there are going to be things that he refuses to listen to or he might filter through. I would say that your information or the knowledge that you're providing him is not going to be unheeded. It's just that it may not connect at the same second that you want it to connect. So just practice, I would say, being patient. One of the biggest things is just being patient in this whole process. Also changing your verbiage. So you should, that is, to some people that could be
usually you better, so I should not say that too.
What I have learned to say, especially like when I'm talking to my student, even though I don't have, adult children, but when I talk to my students, I say I would suggest. So changing the words, changing the frame allows it to be more receptive. They know I'm older than them, so if I'm like, man, you should do this and that, they don't want to hear that. They want to you also want to respect that other person as a human being so they can make their own decisions and say, hey, man, I got some good advice from my mom. She told me, she gave me a suggestion, I took it, versus she told me what to do.
Right.
Because, like I said, in the real world, he's an adult. And, I was a young man. We don't want to be told what to do. Now, if you give a suggestion, I might take that suggestion. But on the same token, you have to be able and willing to accept that he may not take all of your suggestions. And I think that is a big point when you talk about communication on the whole, interpersonal, dealing with other people, that when you offer a suggestion, it can be taken, it cannot be taken. We have to be accepting of both responses to our information that we provide.
I know there was some research that I was doing not too long ago with regard to how to make sure that you are putting out good information that people are receiving. And they talked about the cultural divide for how different cultures tend to communicate. And I noticed, which I was able to come into agreement with, that as a black community, we don't communicate well. And a lot of it is centered around tense conversations that we typically have to have with each other. And so we tend to be forceful in how we talk to one another, as opposed to, like you said, hey, I have a suggestion for you, or hey, did you ever think about this? As opposed to, we're getting in each other's faces, telling you better do this, you better do that. Look, you better get your kid. She in Walmart doing this and this and that. So, do you kind of agree that there are different ways that different cultures communicate, and there are ways that we can hopefully improve that if we understand some of the cultural traits that we bring along?
Most definitely. I'm not going to, I can spend weeks in class to break all that down.
I thought you was going to bring us a PowerPoint so we can break this down.
You got to pay for that. But I would just basically say that all cultures, we're going to communicate differently. Obviously, there's going to be similarities, but there's going to be some differences also. For the black community, I guess I don't think it really matters which community you are a part of when you have an internal, introspective look at how you operate, because it takes two parts to communicate. So again, going back to that transactional model where there's an encoder, decoder, there's a sender and a receiver. If you are sending hostile messages, then you might receive hostile messages. If you send unhostile messages, you might receive unhostile messages. And so you have to be mindful of the part that you play in that experience. If you're going off on people, or you feel the need to tell somebody else about what their child is doing, and you're like, oh, you should do this and that. Again, now you are you might be putting somebody else on the defensive. And so our defensive reaction might be to get hostile. So again, going back, just practicing that mindfulness, how would I want this conveyed to me if I was in that situation? Nobody wants to be screamed at, but yet we scream at other people. You see what I'm saying? So when we start practicing that mindfulness, putting ourselves in that situation, then we can start to change how we actually communicate those issues or those concerns, whatever the case might be.
Okay. So if we talk a little bit about intimate relationships, between men and women, I find that there also tends to be that communication divide. And because we're also, almost ending this month, it's also Domestic Violence Awareness Month, also Breast Cancer Awareness Month. As a family life educator, we look at, how do you prevent those things? And so I do believe that communication is definitely a huge way that we can help to prevent some of these episodes. Definitely. So let's chat a little bit about how men and women can better communicate towards each other, because we know it's hard because your emotions are involved. He might be driving your car while you at work. Look, she using your phone, somebody else's phone, and not responding and things of that nature. So let's talk about better ways that we can get men and women to communicate within relationships.
This is a deep one.
Yeah, we'll probably use the rest of this.
Okay, as long as you got time, I don't want to run over your show and everything. But the way I start these dialogues when I'm doing consulting with couples, whatever the case, starting on the individual level. So understanding first, you have to understand first how you communicate, how you play a part in that dynamic. What are the reasons, what are the things that came, maybe your past experiences, it may be how you perceive the world. What are those things, those experiences that all accumulate to how you communicate? So I start on the first individual, your individual self. Most people know interpersonal communication. We don't really talk about intrapersonal. So intrapersonal is how you communicate within yourself. So looking at messages, visualizations, experiences, and what they all say to you, how you internalize that. So that's the intrapersonal. I start there.
Okay.
We all, again, it's a one-on-one component. We all have a part to play in the communication dynamic. So we have to understand where we start first. Now, when you talk about healthy communication in relationships, I start to look at the end goal. I go with the end goal in mind. What is the end goal of the relationship? What is the end goal of the dynamic? Whatever the case might be.
So that could be either our end goal is to make this a successful relationship and or to end this relationship.
Exactly.
Okay.
If you have gone through whatever experience for whatever amount of time and you realize that, hey, the end goal of this is not going to be a committed relationship, whatever the case, I would suggest to end it. Why deal with torment or hassle, or keep bringing up negative emotions?
But can't you change people?
People change themselves. I mean, okay, so I'm gonna just use one general statement, but a man doesn't change unless a man wants to change. It ain't nothing in the world that's going to make somebody change.
That bears repeating. Can you say that
Well,
again?
A man doesn't change unless a man wants to change.
Get a girlfriend.
I mean, that's an aphorism that I would understand. But, so regardless of the relationship, regardless of the expected outcome of the relationship, if a man in that relationship does not want to change, and I would say I put the onus on the man. The woman generally, and I'm making generalizations, I hope nobody's going to criticize me for, but generally women are going to follow suit on what the man is doing. So if the man is a good, competent leader in that dynamic, then the woman will generally follow suit. There are people, there's always going to be anomalies, but if a man is providing guidance in the relationship, there really isn't going to be a reason for the woman to rock the boat and mess it up. You see what I'm saying? If the woman is satisfied, they're happy with their situation. But if the guy, the gentleman, the man...
Well, what happened to the saying, happy wife, happy life? Was that happy wife, happy life?
I mean, but I think that if a man is guiding the relationship and the woman is happy, then the whole, that dynamic does play a part, two parts of the whole. When a man is not stable, when he may not have the right direction, he doesn't know what the direction is, then that's when a lot of issues start to play out, because nobody knows, there's no rudder to steer what do you call the ship. Well, it's a ship, relationship.
A
so
relationship.
nobody's
Where's your
steering.
ship going? Look,
exactly.
Ship
so
going?
nobody's steering it, and so now you have small things that become big issues, small issues that become big problems, and those big problems start to play out. Talking about the communication, the disillusion in the communication. But again, like I said, it starts with, how did it start? How did the communication start? Was it open and honest communication? Could you be honest about everything? I believe that when people are non-judgmental, they are looked at more as a good person to talk to, communicate with, a good listener.
So be non-judgmental.
Practicing mindfulness. You don't want,
mindfulness.
If you were to share some, intimate situation or some personal, you don't want somebody to make a judgment on you. It's just putting yourself in another person's shoes, And I think that as I've gotten older and met more people, that is something that I think people have seen in me, that they can confide in me about things, because I try hard not to be judgmental about how I receive their information or whatever. So they
okay, let me back you up then.
Yes, ma'am.
So going back to what you stated earlier about focusing on our intrapersonal communication, does that also affect the baggage that people bring into relationships? Because we tend to treat people like we have treated people in the past. So if all my boyfriends, I expected them to put gas in my car up, how come you ain't gassing my car up? So.
Okay, so let's use that example. If you haven't said that on the beginning, then you can't expect it on the end.
Oh, I can't just throw it up in the middle?
Why would you? Because
I needed gas when we first got together. Look, no.
But it's an unmet expectation, and the problem is that you made that unmet expectation. You created that expectation. It's like me going in the house. There might be a young lady there. Why you ain't cook no food? Well, did you ask me to cook any food? Okay. Because if you didn't ask me, then I couldn't read the mind about that. So
these are things that we should be communicating about
up front. Hey,
in the beginning,
and then and think about how it comes across. Wouldn't it be easier if you're just talking to somebody? Hey, my last couple of gentlemen, they actually, if they use my car, they fill the gas up.
No. I'm driving my own car, but I want you to put gas in it because it's cold outside.
Well, whatever the case, then you can convey that message beforehand. That way you aren't left with the unmet expectation.
Okay.
You see? Because now, and it's an interesting thing, because in this day and age, men have to walk this line between women can do without a man. They have, that thing. You never know. Nobody's walking around with face cards that say, hey, I'm feminist, or I'm old school, I like chivalry. Nobody's walking around with that on their forehead. So as a man, we don't really know.
Okay, let me also interrupt this public service announcement. Ladies, you should not need a man, but you should want one. You should want one. You should be able to make your own money, take care of your own stuff, but you should want a gentleman to help you out. So, okay, continue.
I think there's well, on that note, I think it's just about being complimentary. So you don't want somebody, I say that you shouldn't want somebody to complete you. You should want somebody to compliment you.
Absolutely.
You are a complete person in yourself. So if you are looking for somebody to complete you, you might want to start in the mirror and complete yourself.
Boom.
That way you can go and find you a compliment. You see what you give me some wheels with no tires, they're not going to help my car. Well, the car can roll down the street, but it's not going to be practical. You need the wheels, whole wheels, and whole tires.
Right.
They complement each other, the car moves.
And I could give you a compliment with some rims. Add some rims to my nice tires, so we had a nice little
Yeah, so the man is the tire, and then the woman is the nice rim that everybody likes to see. That's how it works.
Okay, so let's talk again about that baggage, how we tend to treat people because of other people that we've treated that way. How do we get rid of that realistic expectation? Because some of us tend to forget that everyone is not the same. You can't talk to such and such like you talk to such and such. I know I can't talk to my sister the way that I talk to my mother. But we still have folks that, well, I talk to everybody like that. I'm like, okay, well, that's why we're in the situation that we're in. So how does that baggage kind of play in, or how do we get rid of that baggage as we move into developing a healthy communication pattern?
Okay, so I will start by saying this. I am not a clinical psychologist. This is not founded in educational research. I'm going to give my own opinion about this, but I'm not a psychologist. So with it coming in the baggage, again, it goes back to understanding yourself, knowing yourself, understanding yourself, really spending time and evaluating how did you get to this point, you know, looking at the situations and maybe seeing what has changed because of that relationship or that dynamic. What you have done, I heard your introduction, I think that's commendable because you are seeking some outside guidance on how you operate in the world. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think, especially in the black community, we had to remove that stigma or that taboo about it because, let's be honest, we don't all know the right answers all the time. And what happens is when we continue to move on ego or just this idea of not needing any help, we continue to perpetuate that. Like you said, well, this is how I talk to everybody. Are the responses that you get from everybody the responses that you want?
Right. Are they your desired response or your expected response? I
know people who are adults. They've lived adult life for a long time, and they've been stuck in their ways. You know, we got that adage, is stuck in your ways. The problem is that that doesn't always help you progress in life. For some people, they might be comfortable with that, but then what happens is, like with you and your son, let's say that you continue to force things on him, it could eventually happen that he just stops talking to you. He deals with you less and less as he gets older because he may not want to deal with that, you know. So you taking those steps to be more mindful and learning and understanding yourself is a big part of removing that baggage or eliminating the baggage and how it changes your communication to other people. And it starts at one day, but it just doesn't start, you know, it doesn't change every day, you know, it doesn't change overnight, but it does start. It is a process, and it's a process of mindfulness, just being, consistent about what your actions are, your repetitive actions. I believe that we are the sum of our repetitive actions and our repetitive choices. So when you choose to practice mindfulness, then you become a more mindful person. You see, when you choose to say, let me listen to somebody completely, then you become that. You see what I mean? So when you're talking about removing excess baggage, I think the biggest thing is looking at the situation and saying, hey, you know what, I really understand those certain things kind of messed up, or it could be relationships, family, friends that you've fallen out with because of how you communicated. At some point, you got to look at it and say, what part did I play in that situation? And now moving forward, how can I change that?
Okay, I like that. Going into trying to do an evaluation of, as we said before, about how do you talk to people and making sure that you're understanding the information that's being conveyed. I'm a big advocate that time heals certain wounds. Not all of them, but certain wounds. So, for instance, if we're having we get into an argument, you know, disagreement on Monday, you know what, I'm going to call you back on Wednesday. We can talk about it on Wednesday. Do you think that possible those delays in communication or a restart, are those good things to do as you're trying to continue to practice healthy communication, that if it didn't work out on Monday, go back and try it again? Or are you one of those, no, just keep trying, keep trying?
I think that the strategy you just talked about is a great strategy. It also depends on the dynamic of your relationship. So if you have the opportunity, a lot of times what they say, cooler heads prevail. So giving people, a day or two to kind of think about it, calling, reaching out, whatever the case might be, and saying, hey, maybe I said some things that you didn't agree with, I have to apologize, whatever the case is. I think that's another thing. People don't like to admit that they have offended somebody else. I'm not even going to say that you were wrong, but you don't even want to admit that you offend somebody else, which is very, I don't know what to say about it. I'm not going to speak on that. But if you give sometimes if you give things some time, they can heal. But I think that even still, there has to be a communication dynamic that's open and honest. And honesty is about being vulnerable. You have to have some level of vulnerability. If you go into a conversation as if nothing just happened, I offended you.
How do you convey that? How do you convey that offensiveness? Because typically, when someone is offended, most of the people in my neighborhood, they go into, "Oh, you pissed me off." Is there a better way to let someone know quietly and calmly, well, you said this and I took offense to that, as opposed to, well, I didn't appreciate this, because I think a lot of times people don't realize that they offend people. I tend to know that because I'm a habitual offender of people. Because
I am.
I am. Because I'm also quite knowledgeable that people are different, and different people pick up on different cues, and there are certain cues that sometimes people aren't ready to deal with it. Other times people don't realize it, and so I tend to be direct. You know, I try to pace myself at times, but I'm also mindful that if I do, and I also use this as a precursor, that if I have said something to offend you, please let me know, because that's not my purpose. My purpose is to educate. My purpose is to uplift and not to offend. But again, I'm a habitual line stepper of offending people. So.
Well, we can't control every single communication. We can't control how somebody's going to respond to every single thing. So you might say, hey, you know what? I apologize. I realize I may have said something that was offensive to you. That person might say, okay.
No. How should they come to me and tell me that I offended them?
How should they come to you? Well, obviously not.
As opposed to sending me stanky DMs and stanky messages on Facebook.
Well, you're going to get. I mean, people are people, and so that's one thing. We cannot change how other people operate. We can change how we react to a situation. So even if somebody was coming to you in a very hostile way, your part that you play in that is about keeping your cooler head. And sometimes it takes a little bit more in-depth analysis, looking at, okay, this person is calling me all kind of names or they're cussing me out. What is the root of why they're doing it? Sir, ma'am, it seems like I may have offended you on something. I understand that. Let me, try to, I would say try to work on the situation or whatever the case.
So I shouldn't respond, why you mad?
It depends on on an honest level, it depends on how you want the relationship to continue. If you don't have any problem with losing the relationship, to say whatever you feel like saying, but understand there's always going to be repercussions, whatever the case might be. But let's say it's a family thing. So you got a family. They reach out to you. They might be all upset about something like that. You can't fires don't grow if there's no fuel for them. So true. If you decide to use some, practicing mindfulness and being, I would say, just being calm about the situation, understanding that it's a small thing. I always talk about, I always look at situations and say, well, how big of a deal is it? Is this going to sever our relationship? If you feel offended, is it a mild offense? Is it an extreme offense?
Something that I can redeem myself from?
Exactly. And the biggest part of that, I think, on the end of wanting to be redemptive of it, is to invoke that as behavior. People, we give words all the time, but our actions speak louder than our words. So Absolutely. If you're apologetic about a situation, you want to be redeemed, then showing a consistent action or behavior, that is what is going to give the lasting impression. And it might even make the relationship even stronger, because somebody said, that person cared about, Shaynel cared about me enough that not only did she realize that she offended me, she also took the time to make sure she didn't do it again. So that could actually hold more volume than just having a response or whatever the case. Again, you can't control how people, reach out to you, but it's happened to me where people have come, I worked in customer service. Students mad about a grade.
Well,
you get that. But when people came, and I worked in customer service too, so people come and they're upset, the frustration could have been exacerbated if I was to get all angry back with them. But just being calm, and I think the other thing is giving them steps to a resolution. If they come at you all upset, hey, you know what? I understand that you're frustrated. Let me tell you what I can do next time. That way you resolve it. You can't fuel a fire if there ain't nothing there.
Okay. I like that, because I also think that that can transfer into, the relationship, the conversation that you're having. What can we do to resolve it so that I don't say this to you again, or that we don't find ourselves in this situation where you did this and this is my reaction to it.
Exactly. So. And if you think about the relationship dynamic, it's a lot of small things that amount to a big issue. So what I was told in business school, and I use this in relationship strategy consultations, small issues become big problems if they are not managed when they're small issues. So one small thing, oh, he's always leaving the kitchen light, leaving the lights on in the house and he's not in the room. That could be a small thing. If it's not addressed right there, then it becomes a big problem. The person who has the offense at that point, if they have the problem with it, but they don't say anything about it, well, guess what? The other person think, oh, it's cool.
It's fine. I'm gonna do it again.
And it's not even that they saying it as out of spite to the other person. They just don't know that it's a problem. And then what you have again is an unmet expectation.
I usually use the analogy for that particular circumstance, the analogy of the ugly sweater from grandma. When Christmas comes around, your grandma gives you an ugly sweater. She give it to you every year. So instead of saying, grandma, this is nice, but I really prefer a Batman T-shirt, she's going to keep giving you these other ugly sweaters because you don't say that you don't like them. So she accepts it. Oh, she loves those sweaters. I can't wait to knit another one for next year. So.
Yeah, when we sit, and it's that passive. We live in a passive aggressive society where we don't say anything because we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But I mean, the truth of the matter is, you have to address an issue at that moment, because what you do is you leave somebody else in suspense. So. 15 years, Shaynel, 15 years I've been giving you these sweaters. I thought you loved them. What have you been doing with them? What have you been doing with them?
Selling them on eBay.
Exactly. So now you've hurt that person's feeling even more. When at the first time you can say, hey, you know what, Grandma, I appreciate the thought. However, I would really enjoy a Batman T-shirt.
Right. And I also like how you mentioned that the leaving the light on thing, because again, going back to relationships, the communication problems can be compounded when they're not addressed when it actually happens.
Exactly.
Like you said, because oftentimes we feel like, well, I don't want to, hurt the other person's feelings, and I'm not going to yell about it. It's not a big deal. But again, that kind, hey, do you mind turning the light off when you leave the room, as opposed to when you mention it a year later, you leave the light on, you leave this, you do this, you don't do that, and
bringing up a whole laundry list. One other thing I would say is, as equally as we can share the discrepancies in the relationship, we should be able to positively reinforce the positive relationship, the positive issues in the relationship. So that open communication, that healthy communication, is not just a part of addressing issues as they come up, but also reinforcing on the positive side. You know what? I really appreciate that you did this. Or that
I really appreciate that you put some gas in my car.
Exactly. Do you say it that way? Because I don't know if that's going to be taken. It sounds a little...
Like I said, that's not a factor in my relationship. I'm just using it as an example.
Okay.
But I'm thinking about it now. That might be a good deal because winter's coming around the corner. I need to get some gas.
Now everybody want to see all the independent women not independent anymore.
I am independent. I'm independent enough and wise enough to know that while you're going to put some gas in the car, I might be making you a sandwich. See?
Okay. All right. Well, touche. I ain't going to speak on that.
Okay, how about our newest and most important way of communicating is social media. How is social media communication different than our verbal communication?
Because people can say what they want and not get the repercussion.
I saw a meme the other day that said social media has allowed people to say stuff to people without getting punched in the mouth.
Exactly. There's a lot of stuff, and we know this, and I'm speaking generally, and then I'll speak with the academic reference point. But generally speaking, we can get on the internet and say all kind of recklessness that we know we probably wouldn't say in their face. Even, what's that show, was it Jimmy Fallon? One of them late night shows, they do like the mean tweets, and they got celebrities on there reading like bad tweets and stuff.
Yes.
People saying all that recklessness that they would never go in front of somebody like Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, and they're not going to say nothing about him. He punched them, knocked their whole block. So we have the ability to say all kind of reckless stuff, and most of the time, you have to. And I think that if you are a social media personality, if you are on social media and the platforms, you got to be aware that people are going to say stuff. It could be you don't want to read too much into it, but it could be a reflection of how they view themselves. If they feel that they don't have getting a rise out of something they enjoy doing. And so if you feed into that, again, a fire ain't going to grow if you don't have nothing there. So if you feed into that, then you start to, keep that fire stoked. But if you just ignore it, then guess what? They can only keep doing it and then they'll get tired of it. That's normally what happens. You got social media bullies. I'm creating a course so I can talk to the high schools about this, about that social media presence for the younger generations and we talk about cyberbullying and things of that nature, how relevant it is now, and it kind of surprised me.
And how they need to be best.
Well, being very mindful of a lot of different things. Social media influence doesn't equal real life influence.
Right.
Just because somebody is popular for doing reckless stuff they have real life consequences for that stuff, you know. I talk to my college students about the idea of your social media identity, how it may play a part if you are looking for jobs, or if you're doing anything else in the orient. You know, especially talking to some students about, you know, I don't want to say anything disparaging, but let's face it, people do stupid stuff, and I'm like, man, the police could be looking at you while you taking pictures and doing this and doing that recklessness.
Yeah, a lot of insurance companies. I read an article in the Washington Post the other day that a lot of insurance companies are starting to look at the social media profiles of their drivers under 30. Particularly because all the videos of, you know, people doing a Kiki challenge, jumping out their cars and getting into accidents and things of that nature. So, like you said, sometimes that can be detrimental, where people don't believe that, you know, people are watching.
Yeah, it's open internet, and this whole idea of wanting to get more followers and things of that nature, doing things just so people can get you some likes. But they have real life, you know, they have real life. I don't know.
Real life ramifications.
Yeah, that's a great word for it that I lost. It's just them having to be aware that this is the age that they live in now, and it's very interesting to look at their dynamic, and they don't really realize it that way. They think it's just it's fun for my friends and stuff like that. It's like, all right, so when you start applying for jobs and they can see your name pop up, and they see you, you know, like you said, dancing out the car, or just acting a fool, or whatever the case is, you know, that's terrible. I also talked to them about sharing these videos. When you share a video of somebody getting in a fight, you actually become an accomplice. When you share a video of all kind of reckless sexual stuff, then you become you have distributed. I'm telling you, you distributed you distributed pornography. So taking, you know, when you're in high school and you taking videos, you taking videos of some people doing whatever the case, and you post it on Facebook or whatever, you just distributed child pornography. So you can be going to jail for felony charges for that. So I try to, you know, encourage them to be more mindful of how they operate in the social media world, the kind of stuff that they talk about. People going to do what they do. And it's unfortunate because I think a lot of times the best lessons in life are learned by the scars that we get from them.
I like that. And we'll definitely have to have you come back on the show and talk about that.
Okay, nice.
So circling back to the communication, the nonverbal communication, I was listening on my way here, an old song, I can't think of what her name was, but everyone knows the song, I Bust Your Windows Out Your Car. You remember that? Jasmine Sullivan, I bust your windows out your car. But I was the mindset that I had was couples communicating via social media and text, that I'm breaking up with you, send, and moving out. So how is it that we can do a better job of understanding? Because, you know, like I know, typically text messages will lead to bad communication because whether or not it's in all caps, which tends to designate that you're yelling at someone, or if you say something real short and don't put maybe a emoji or a smiley face after, they say, well, you said this and I didn't mean that. I do see that there tends to be a lot of miscommunication because of text messages.
Yeah, definitely. We are humans. We've been used to communicating with people in face for thousands of years, and then in the last 20 years it started getting like this. And, you know, I even talk to my students, like, they go out, they hang out with their friends, they be sitting around on the text messaging people who not even there. Well, why are you hanging out with your friends then?
That's a good point.
You worried about the people who's not where you are. How can you be in the moment? You know, when it comes to that interpersonal relationship thing, we do all this text messaging, so we never have the face-to-face conversations. We don't know if somebody's really that person. It sounds good on the text message. You got time to read it and think about it, and do I really want to say this? Well, maybe I don't want to say that, and you know, that kind of thing.
The little dots that disappear and you start back up again.
Then in person, they either, you like, dude, you lame, man. Like, what are you talking about? You know, you go out, the younger generation, they go out, you know, first 3 minutes they at the table, they pull out their phone. They got text messages or take a picture of Instagram. Be in the moment. You know, be in the moment. Be present. Be active where you are. Live. You know what I'm saying?
I like it. I like it.
Live. If you had to sit in a hospital for 20 years and that's the only way you communicate with people, you hate it. You want to get outside and do something. Then you go out and do something and everybody's texting. Do kids play on the basketball court anymore? We don't know.
Well, if they send you a picture of themselves on the basketball court.
Exactly. You know, spend all the time. Like, I go to the gym and it'd be grown men standing in the mirror taking pictures. I'm like, what kind of, I don't understand. The definition of manhood has obviously changed now, where people is just standing there taking pictures of themselves in the mirror. Women, I ain't making no judgment
Can y'all
on
pull
women,
up his
but
IG
gosh.
and see if there are any pictures of Professor Kev on his Instagram?
I got pictures because that's what we got to do. I mean, that's, getting some notoriety out here. But I wouldn't just go to the gym and be standing in front of the picture for 10 minutes trying to get the perfect pose. Yeah, a little different ball game. Yikes.
I saw a lady, and it's been a long time since I go to the gym. I donate monthly, faithfully. I just don't go. But I saw a woman.
Shit, I donate.
I saw a woman come in. I was
hey.
I saw a woman. I was on a treadmill. She came in, took some photos, and then she left. And I was like, wow, okay, I bet she put that up. Yeah, I'm at the gym. I did, 20 minutes of cardio. I did this and this and that. So yeah, it is a different way that we communicate and how we try to make sure people understand what we're trying to put out there, even though it may not be true at all.
Oh, yeah, people be faking and flexing for the gram, though. Mm-hmm. And I think that when you talked about, we all have our own motivations for communication. And I think that's the most important thing. We got our own motivations. So my motivation for communicate may not be yours. You taking pictures of you may be to help enhance your business, enhance your, your body of work, whereas somebody else might just be taking pictures so they can get some likes or whatever the case might be. So we have to, and that's part of being non-judgmental. And it's hard,
right.
It's difficult. I just have to say, people are people. That's one thing that I have learned to be a lot less judgmental about, when I just say, you know what, people are people. And whatever kind of reckless craziness that I think that they're doing, people are people.
That's true. I mean, I do pride myself on being non-judgmental, and I don't judge people, but I will talk about you. I'm not going to judge you, but I'm going to talk about you. That happens.
I think that in this day and age with that social media, man, it's just a product of the time. And I think, the good thing about it is it keeps people like me relevant, because you can still study this stuff, looking at the effects of this and how it operates on people. When we talk about businesses using social media, and now think about something as simple as sponsorships. So now you get sponsorships from companies that are people who may be YouTube celebrities or something like that, when it used to only be like athletes and entertainers. Mm-hmm. Now you're getting into general people that have a following in this social media realm. So it's very interesting. I got a buddy of mine, an acquaintance that I know that's on Instagram, and he has a sponsorship with different clothing lines, because he just takes pictures of clothes and things like that. So it is an interesting dynamic, and it's very new. It's changing the way we communicate with each other, changing the way we do commerce in the country and around the world. So it's very interesting. I mean, when you look at it on a larger scale, it's a very interesting thing, the social media, and how it's just progressed, our society leaps and bounds.
Right, and change the way that we communicate.
Yeah, exactly.
Before, as we wrap up and come into our last couple of minutes, what about nonverbal communication cues? Do you think that that's something that we tend to overlook, how people are trying to tell us or tell us what they're thinking, or whether or not they're trying to be engaged with us because of some of the nonverbal cues that they emit?
I think I would say that we don't overlook nonverbal. That's the first thing that we learn how to communicate when we come out the womb. We don't understand the sounds and syllables. We can only go by what people are doing or saying. You look at a baby, start smiling, they probably smile too. They see that is some way of saying that it's comfortable, it's okay. We understand nonverbal communication. Now we have to, again, sender and receiver of a message, we have to process what that message might be. I talk to people about how they position themselves, their posture, and things of that nature when they're talking to people. You may want to be approachable, but if you are posturing yourself in a standoff manner, then you're not going to be approached. Mm-hmm.
Except those people that usually sit right next to me on the plane. I'm in my book and they talk to me, I answer, I'll go back to the book.
Well, that's
I'll
talking.
go back to the
yeah,
book.
but that's talking though. So
yeah, but I'm trying to get them to stop talking to me. They're not getting my nonverbal cue. I'm in this book. Stop talking to me.
Have you told them that?
I didn't want to hurt their feelings. Didn't we say that earlier?
Hey, man, I just got this book. It's great. I'm really trying to read this joint.
Gotcha.
I mean, you can say something to kind of resolve that. But one thing I do is I talk to people in the counseling. I don't want to say nothing, but it'd be women who are in their 30s or whatever the case, established in the world, can't find a man. And so I might say something as simple as, so when you go out, how many women do you go out with?
And they say 10.
My girls. I was like, okay, so here's the thing. The kind of man that you want is not going to run up on a group of
herd of women
and try to talk to you. So you're already doing yourself a disservice by that. That's a nonverbal communication point. Why don't you go by yourself? Because I'm scared. I'm like, but you're trying to meet people, right? That's the point. You don't. If you go with people, then you can't meet other people. Like
exactly.
The guys that you keep saying that you don't like getting are the ones who have no concern about going up to 6 women and just hollering at them.
Waiting to see which one bite.
Exactly. So you already looking at it that way, but you're like, well, these guys I've had, they're not doing. Well, okay, so now you need to do something different.
Okay, so again, that's part of that nonverbal, the cues that people are emitting.
Yes, and I talked to the fellas about looking at the nonverbal cues of how women communicate if they're in those kind of settings and situations, hand, body language, posture, how they're positioned. Women, you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, but I believe that I'm correct about it. A woman, let's say you're at the bar, you might be talking to a guy, you might turn your head. You might just want to talk. That's not saying you're really interested in them. When women turn their whole body, that's showing us more open to the conversation, communication dynamic.
I do recall that.
Okay, so that is one of the things I tell guys. Like, if she's just turning her head, like you said about reading the book, but you're not really talking, shut up and keep moving, or whatever, end the conversation, do whatever you got to do. Exactly. I mean, because there's no need to try to force that, if that person is not open to it. So you got to find the people who are open.
Okay. Look, well, again, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. Before
Thank
we
you for
go,
having me.
Can you tell our viewers where they can find you and how they can follow you on social media?
Instagram and Twitter, Introverted Kev. I'm an introvert, so I identify as an introvert, so I talk a little bit from my perspective. Introversion isn't about being shy. Obviously, I'm here on camera. It's just about how we interact and our energy, how we social settings and how our energy is, how we operate mentally and things of that nature. So I just share my experiences in life as being an introvert.
Awesome.
So the name is Introverted Kev.
Okay. And there, again, they can catch you at a couple of the colleges that you're at. Can you repeat those again for us?
Bowie State, Howard Community College, and College of Southern Maryland.
Awesome, awesome. Because we may have some viewers that want to have you come down and work for them as well and do a class.
Hey, the price is right. I'm with it.
All right. Again, we want to thank everyone for tuning in to this week's edition of Shaynel's 3 Cents with your host, Shaynel. Again, we hope you like everything that you've heard today, but if not, at least you've heard it. We'll see you back next week.